Hi! Maayo nga aga, maupay nga aga, magandang umaga, good morning, buenos dias. I am Shark Silbola, your reporter for today, and I will be tackling language and its influences on our culture. Our objectives are: understand how Spanish American and Japanese occupation influence Philippine language. Second, explore how language and culture are interrelated. Third, determine how language develops in cultural context. Example, accents, dialects, customs, and norms. Fourth, explain how people adjust their communicative behavior during social interaction by communication accommodation and code switching. Fifth, we have demonstrate awareness of how our verbal communication reveals biases towards various cultural identities based on race, gender, age, sexual orientation, and ability. Lastly, to examine how language affects Philippine culture and society. We all know that language is a system of communication consisting of sounds, words, and grammar. We use language as a tool to communicate. It might be by our hand gestures, facial expression, the things we write in our essays, and even the words we speak. And if you're going to ask me if the animals are mimicking language, absolutely no. Because language must consist of sounds, words, and grammar. It is highly structured. So therefore, it is no. Speaking of language, we all know that Philippines is an archipelago consisting of almost 7,600 islands. Hence, there are about 170 dialects. But the major languages are Tagalog, Ilocano, Pangasinense, Pampango, Bicolano, Cebuano, Hiligaynon, and Waray Samarnon. We have diverse language rooted from our different society that flourished in different islands, sharing or having different culture. And aside from us being far away, because we are having different culture depending on what islands or what society we are in, we were also influenced by the three subjugators or colonizers, mainly Spanish. So, one of the most obvious ways that Spanish influenced us is vivid in our language. About 1/3 or 4,000 of Tagalog words came from Spain, and around 6,000 words in other Filipino languages are from Spain too. It was said that during the Spanish regime, Filipinos were forced to speak Spanish language in order for the Spanish government to understand them, because Spanish government feared that Filipinos would make rebellion against them. So therefore, they should speak the same language so that Spanish could monitor everything that they do. And it is also said that our ancestors recite Spanish form prayers, where Catholic religion is highly flourishing or has been patronized during the Spanish regime. Hence, we have similar language as them. And it is also vivid in Zamboanga, where Chavacano are a group of Spanish-based Creole group. So, here are the words that are similar with Spanish. First one is azul. So, in Spain, it is azul, it's Z. And azul is blue in English. And the next one is ventana. It is ventana in Spanish, which is window in English. Bicicleta in Tagalog, bicicleta in Spanish, and bicycle in English. It is brazo in Spanish, it is brazo in Tagalog, and it is arm in English. These are just some of the examples of how similar our language is from them. And if you are gonna want to know about more, you can Google it yourself. So then we have the American occupation. When the America arrived in the Philippines in 1898, English was systematically promoted as the language that would civilize the Filipinos. It was the language that the colonizer introduced to the colonized so that the latter would be able to participate in a society determined by colonialism. Did you know that during the American occupation, they built schools, and the teachers originally came from America in order to teach such language. So the teachers are called Thomasites. Eventually, when the Filipinos pursued education, they learned to speak the same language or the English language. So moving forward, we have the Japanese occupation. The Philippines was occupied by Japanese during World War II, which produced many long-lasting effects, both good and bad, on Filipino literature. Writing in Tagalog, the native Philippine language, was greatly encouraged, while writing in English was severely limited and often forbidden altogether. Furthermore, there was no freedom of speech or press, and censorship was widely practiced. So during the Japanese occupation, our ancestors were truly limited in their language. They are prohibited to speak in English. That is why it also helped our language to flourish, because everyone is using either Japanese or Tagalog language. And there have been literature that was a reflection of how Filipinos were maltreated way back then. So the literature was called the wartime Filipino literature. It is marked as a pessimistic and bitter, owing to the extreme cruelty and hardships that our ancestors, or the Filipino ancestors, endured during the Japanese occupation. Much Japanese influence later then diminished, and our ancestors, or the Filipinos, were likely in Western sensibility following the end of World War II. Since you already know that three subjugators or colonizers, now let's go to the relationship between language and culture. We often hear the phrase language is culture, because when language and culture are discussed, it is having a homogeneous relationship. When we say homogeneous relationship, they have similarity. So, language and culture are developed together and influence each other as they evolve using the context, according to Alfred L. Kruger. A cultural anthropologist from the United States said that the culture started when speech was available, and from that beginning, the enrichment of either one lead to the other to develop further. So, a particular language points out to the culture, particular to the social group. Learning language, therefore, is not only learning the alphabet, the meaning, the grammar rules, and the arrangement of words, but it is also learning the behavior of society and its cultural customs. So, language and culture are like a reflection of each other. So, the language would determine the culture, and the culture would determine the language. So, that is how they are closely related. So next we have the language and cultural context. So it focuses on how language develops in specific contexts, how meaning is determined by context, and how people express their identities through language. So we have accents and dialects. When we say dialects, these are the versions of language that have distinct words, grammar, and pronunciation. According to Lustig and Koester 2006, there can be multiple accents with one dialect. Some accent can show where they are from. For instance, in Bantayan, I am from Bantayan, and we have there three municipalities, Santa Fe, Madrideos, and Bantayan itself. So Santa Fehanon, or the people in Santa Fe, are soft-spoken, so they speak smoothly. On the other hand, Bantayanon, or the place where I came from, we are speaking with full force. So when the two people speaks, you can easily determine which one is from Santa Fe and which one is from Bantayan. So that is how accent could be determined. Although they speak the same language or dialect, but because they have distinctive accents, you can determine where they came from. Another, we have customs and norms. Social norms are culturally relative. The words used in politeness, rituals in one culture can mean something completely different in another. For example, thank you in American English acknowledges receiving something, a gift, a favor, or a compliment. In British language, thank you means yes, similar to American language, yes, please, and in French, merci can mean no, as in no, thank you. It is according to Crystal 2005. So words, although that words are the same, no, it's the same thank you, but it could differ depending on the place where you are in. So that is how tricky a language could be in cultural context. So moving forward, we have communication accommodation and code switching. So communication accommodation theory is a theory that explores why and how people modify their communication to fit situational, social, cultural, and relational contexts, according to Gillis Taylor and Boris 1973. Within communication accommodation, conversational partners may use convergence, meaning a person makes his or her communication more like another person's, or it could go the other way, which is called divergence, which one person highlights that his language is really different from another. When we say communication accommodation, this means that we are adjusting in order to fit to the situation. For instance, if I am from Philippines and then I suddenly go to America, I should adjust because it's me against them. I should use the same language in order to be understood and in order to be appropriate to the place where I am in. On the other hand, code switching CS, is a practice of moving back and forth between two languages or between two dialects or registers of the same language at one time. Code switching occurs for more often in conversation than in writing. It is also called code mixing and style shifting. You know what? When we say communication accommodation, it is like adjusting your language. But in code switching, it is more like adjusting your accent. For example, Indians are smart people. However, the way they speak is really different. That is why the BPO is in the Philippines, because it is known that Filipinos are excellent speakers. And Indians speaking in BPO were highly bashed, or because they doesn't sound appropriate, especially when they took to a person whose language is English. They find it funny when the Indians speak. So that is why Indian tries harder in order to align, or in order to meet the expectation of their clients who are British English. So they tend to code switch or to change their accent in order to adapt and in order to be more appropriate. So next we have language and cultural biases. Language is a powerful tool, and sometimes it could go beyond the edge, or it could go way farther, which could lead to cultural biases. So when we say cultural bias, that is a skewed way of viewing or talking about a group that is typically negative. Bias is a way of creeping into our daily language use, often under our awareness. Biased language contains words or phrases that are offensive, prejudiced, excluding, or hurtful. It makes certain people or groups feel misunderstood, cast out, or misinterpreted. Culturally biased language can make references to one or more cultural identities, including race, gender, age, sexual orientation, and ability. So how to say that the language is already a cultural bias in race? It is a time when you say nega and black to a person that is obviously black, or to a person that obviously came from Africa. You shouldn't have addressed that thing, because that is racism, or you're being racist by that act. And in gender, you should not label a person gay. Instead, you should use her name, or there are different terms in LGBTQIA, and you should use those instead. Because being labeled as gay is really unethical, and that sounds so offensive. And then age, did you know that in America, it is so inappropriate to ask for their age? Yeah, it might seem normal to ask Filipinos, because what happens in birthday, we are typically asked what is our age, but in America, that is very unethical. As well as with sexual orientation and the ability. So people with this ability are not less of a human. No, they are the same with us. They are capable of doing things too that we can. And helping them without their consent might be an act of offense. That is why if you are gonna help them, ask first if they are willing to be given help. And do not use the terms handicap or puroy, because there are other terminologies that would appropriately fit on what disability they have. So it is our responsibility to know those words, because in that sense we could be respectful, and I think that is a basic human decency, and it is our responsibility as humans to learn those things. And the best part of our discussion is how language affect Philippine culture and society. So first, we have been socialized to follow implicit social rules like those that guide the flow of conversations, including how we start and end our interactions and how we change topics. So, humans being social, we speak, right? So, through learning languages or through learning different languages, we tend to learn how to socialize and to start conversation. Basically in making a graduation address or a speech. We started with greeting and then ended with thank you. Second, the way we use language changes as we shift among academic, professional, personal, and civic contexts. So sometimes we shift our language depending on the person on whom we are talking with. So when it comes to peers or barkada, we often use informal language and offensive ones which we find normal because that's how we speak when we are in a certain circle that we are comfortable with. However, when it is in school or in a workplace, it should be more appropriate or more formal because we are speaking with different kind of people and they are from different ranks. And the third one is the language that we speak influences our cultural identities and our social realities. Yes, it is true. Remember a saying that we are what we speak. So, no matter what opinions or ideas that comes in our mind and we speak, that reflects on who we are as a person. Fourth is we internalize norms and rules that help us functioning in our own culture but can lead to misunderstanding when used in other cultural contexts. So for example, I experienced it like myself. When I adjusted here in Cebu to conduct face-to-face classes, when we bought a food, it was automatically put in plastic. So I was worried and I said, "Dili na malubot ya?" And then he replied, "Huh?" And then I forgot that lubot in us means buslot. And then lubot in your dialect Cebuano, it means like bat or samput. So it was kind of offensive because basically it's something that is so so sensitive to tackle about. So I was also wrong. No, it was also my fault in the first place because I haven't known. I should have known better. And yeah, through learning their language, I came to adjust. Yeah, by doing communication accommodation. And the fifth one is we can adapt to different cultural contexts by purposely changing our communication. Yes. In order for you to be understood and to fit into certain situation, you should like code switch or change the way you speak so that you can be a most appropriate speaker of that certain language. And it is also our part, no, it is our responsibility in our end to adjust. Basically, when we go to other places, we should learn their language so that we could not offend someone or we could not cause misunderstanding. So note that communication accommodation theory explains that people may adapt their communication to be more similar or different from others based on various contexts. Thus, we should become more aware of how our verbal communication reveals biases towards various cultural identities based on race, gender, age, and sexual orientation and ability. So as I remind all of you, it is always our responsibility not to adjust, especially when we go to that certain place. We should learn to adapt to new things in order to go with the flow smoothly. Because it is not always about us. It is the thing that we should do in order to make things appropriate and functional. I think my discussion ends here. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening.